Why did no one move at first? That was the question that would haunt them later. The stillness, the stunned silence that filled the coffee shop the moment his hand struck her. The sound wasn't just a slap. It was a crack, sharp and final, like a rifle report in a place that should have been safe. The coffee shop outside Fort Benning had always been neutral ground, officers, recruits, even civilians blending together for a few minutes of peace before returning to the rigid machinery of the base. The air usually smelled of espresso and rain-wet uniforms. Conversations floated around about deployment dates, failed marriages, pay grades. It was a space where people pretended the world was simpler than it really was. But on that afternoon, everything stopped. Staff Sergeant Derek Coleman's voice had already been rising, the kind of tone that made the barista hesitate before stepping closer. His laugh was too loud, his stance too confident. Everyone knew that kind of man, the one who thought rank made him invincible. The woman he'd cornered had barely looked up from her laptop. Civilian clothes, hair tied back in a practical knot. Quiet. The kind of quiet that made some men think she was weak. She was. Her name was Jennifer Morrison, though few knew it then. To the soldiers in the room, she was just another civilian, maybe a student, maybe a dependent. No one knew that the woman sitting alone had once commanded an operation overseas, or that the faint scar beneath her left ear came from shrapnel in Eastern Europe. Coleman had approached her with that easy swagger, the predator's smile of a man who'd gotten away with too much for too long. When she'd said no, softly at first, then firmly, something inside him twisted. He wasn't used to hearing that word. Not in uniform, not off base. When his hand connected with her face, she fell hard, head striking the corner of the table before hitting the floor. Coffee spilled across the tile. Her phone clattered beside her. Her breath caught. The silence lasted less than a second. Then chairs scraped back. Someone shouted. Two young privates lunged forward, dragging Coleman away as he cursed, spitting words he'd used too many times before. You think you can. You'll regret. But Jennifer didn't answer. She pushed herself up on trembling hands, blood already trickling from her temple. Her phone's camera light blinked faintly. It had caught everything. She didn't cry. She didn't shout. She just hit save, her fingers shaking as she did it. The barista dialed base security. The other customers murmured. Everyone looked, but no one quite knew what to do with what they'd seen. Coleman was laughing again, that dry, arrogant laugh that said he still believed this would end like all the others, a warning, a quiet meeting, a cover-up signed by someone higher up. He didn't know who she was. When the military police arrived, she refused to sit down. She refused to be escorted out quietly or have the blood wiped from her face. She told them clearly. She wanted every statement, every witness, every recording. Her tone wasn't emotional. It was professional. It carried the weight of someone who'd filed reports before and seen them disappear into silence. And in that tone, calm, cold, certain, there was something that made even the senior officer on scene straighten his posture. One of the privates who'd pulled Coleman off her whispered to the MP, "Sir, I think she's someone." He was right. Within 17 minutes, the base commander's phone rang. And then 3 black SUVs appeared at the main gate, fast, coordinated, deliberate. The kind of convoy that made everyone stop whatever they were doing. 3 generals stepped out. 3 sets of stars caught the sunlight. The air changed. But let's pause there before the SUVs, before the shock that would ripple through Fort Benning. Let's go back to the moment Jennifer sat there, blood drying on her cheek, watching Coleman laugh as they read him his rights. She knew this script too well. For years she'd watched reports vanish. She'd seen women silenced, men transferred instead of punished, complaints dismissed as misunderstandings. She had built her thesis around it, the disappearance of accountability in the modern military system. It wasn't just academic, it was personal. She had served 12 years, led troops, buried friends. And yet, in the end, what haunted her most wasn't the firefight she'd survived overseas. It was the quiet betrayal that came afterward, the file marked inconclusive, the commander who'd said, "You don't want this on your record." That afternoon in the coffee shop wasn't random. It was the last test of a woman who'd already given everything. Jennifer had come home on medical leave 2 months earlier. Her shoulder still ached from the last mission, a black operation in Eastern Europe that went wrong when the extraction team was ambushed. She had led 6 soldiers out under fire, but 2 hadn't made it. She still heard their voices sometimes in the quiet moments before sleep. She had told herself that finishing her degree, studying military justice, might give those memories purpose, that maybe she could help fix what she couldn't save. But now, standing there with her blood staining the floor, she realized something cruelly poetic. The system she was studying was about to meet her in person. Outside, the sun hung low. The base carried on with its drills and meetings, unaware that within an hour its gates would close. Inside the commander's office, word spread fast. The report came through in fragments. Civilian assaulted by NCO. Recording made. Name confirmed, Captain Jennifer Morrison. And then one final line that made every officer in the room go still. Daughter of General Patricia Morrison. The colonel in charge, a man who prided himself on his spotless record, felt a cold wave wash through him. He had heard of General Morrison. Everyone had. She wasn't the kind of leader who made calls. She arrived. While security processed Coleman, she was already en route. Her convoy cut through traffic, sirens clearing the road. She didn't say a word during the drive. Her aide tried twice to brief her, but she only raised one hand and said quietly, "I saw the video." At the coffee shop, Jennifer sat alone in the corner, still refusing to go to the hospital until the paperwork was complete. Her laptop was open, pages of her thesis still visible beneath the splatter of spilled coffee. The words "systemic silence" underlined twice. She looked exhausted. Her left hand trembled as she typed, but her jaw remained tight, her eyes cold and clear. One of the MPs approached, hesitant. "Ma'am, your mother." Jennifer cut him off. Not yet." She didn't want the story to become about bloodlines. She wanted it to be about accountability. But fate didn't care what she wanted. At 15:37 hours, the SUVs rolled past the checkpoint. Soldiers snapped to attention. Conversation stopped. General Patricia Morrison stepped out, her uniform immaculate, her expression unreadable. Her first words were quiet, almost gentle. "Where is she?" When she entered the cafe, every soldier inside rose instinctively. The room felt smaller, denser. Jennifer looked up, her eyes meeting her mother, across the space. Neither spoke for several seconds. Then Patricia crossed the distance and knelt beside her daughter, not as a general, but as a mother. "You okay?" she asked softly. Jennifer nodded once. "I will be." Then Patricia stood, her voice shifting into the tone that could freeze a room. "Lock the base, now." Within minutes, radios crackled. The base gates sealed. Flights were grounded. Calls went out. The message spread like wildfire. Fort Benning is on lockdown. Coleman was transferred to a holding cell under direct supervision. The colonel in charge of the base tried to explain, to justify the delay, the confusion, the standard procedure. General Morrison didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her silence was enough. That night, files were opened that hadn't been touched in years. Complaints resurfaced. Statements once buried under insufficient evidence saw light again. And as Jennifer sat in the base infirmary, a nurse cleaning the cut above her eye, she realized something she hadn't before. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about every woman who had been told to keep it quiet, every soldier who had swallowed their pain for the sake of the team, every officer who'd chosen silence over justice. Outside, floodlights lit the compound. Inside, General Morrison stood by the window, watching her daughter rest. Her reflection looked older than she remembered, harder, wearier. But in her chest, a fierce pride burned. She whispered to no one in particular, "Not this time." And somewhere across the base, Derek Coleman sat in a cold metal chair, still wearing the smirk that had carried him through every investigation, every warning. He didn't realize that the world around him was about to change. For the first time in his career, no one was coming to save him. Why did the air feel heavier when the base went silent? For a place built on noise, engines, commands, drills, orders, the sudden stillness felt wrong. Fort Benning hadn't seen a full lockdown in years. Gates closed, communications restricted, personnel confined to quarters unless summoned. Even the birds seemed to quiet. It was as if the entire base was holding its breath, waiting for something inevitable. Inside the command building, officers moved fast, but no one spoke louder than a whisper. 3 generals were reviewing files, and one of them was Patricia Morrison. That alone was enough to make men who had worn the uniform for 20 years feel like new recruits again. She stood at the head of the room, hands behind her back, eyes moving over reports spread across the conference table. Every file was a story, complaints, investigations, statements that had gone nowhere. It was all there, just buried under layers of bureaucracy and signatures. Colonel Hughes, the base commander, shifted uncomfortably beside her. "Ma'am," he began, "I assure you." She didn't look up. "You assure me what, Colonel?" "That this incident does not reflect the overall conduct of this installation." Now she did look at him, and in that look the temperature dropped a few degrees. "Then explain why Staff Sergeant Derek Coleman has 3 prior complaints, all marked unsubstantiated, yet each from different victims in different units." Hughes swallowed. "Ma'am, those were handled at the company level." "Meaning," she said, voice calm, "they were buried." No one spoke after that. Behind her, 2 aides cataloged files as she flipped through pages. Names, dates, patterns. It was all there, and she could see it for what it was, a culture that had learned to protect itself instead of its people. She'd seen it before, but never so close to home. Across the base, in the small infirmary, Jennifer sat in silence as a medic finished dressing the wound above her eye. The antiseptic burned, but she didn't flinch. Pain didn't bother her anymore, not physical pain, at least. It was the silence that did. The nurse was careful, quiet, glancing occasionally toward the door where 2 MPs stood guard. It wasn't protection she needed. It was procedure. The daughter of a general wasn't just any patient tonight. She was the spark that had lit a fire across the base. Jennifer looked out the window. Floodlights cut across the compound, throwing long shadows. The scene felt distant, surreal. She wondered if she should feel anger or fear or satisfaction, but mostly she just felt tired. Her phone lay beside her on the tray, the video still there, time-stamped, undeniable. Every frame was evidence. Every second, a record of what too many people had ignored for too long. She didn't want fame. She didn't want revenge. She wanted truth and a system that didn't eat its own. When the door opened, she didn't need to turn to know who it was. "Still not resting," her mother said softly. Jennifer exhaled through her nose, not quite a sigh. Didn't feel right sleeping through a revolution. Patricia gave a faint, humorless smile. "That's what this is, isn't it?" Jennifer finally met her gaze. "Shouldn't have to be." Her mother studied her. The bruising had begun to bloom on her cheek, purple, deep, raw. A soldier's mark, but one she hadn't earned on the battlefield. That stung worse than any wound Jennifer had ever carried. Patricia sat beside her bed, her uniform still crisp despite the 14-hour day. For a moment, she wasn't a general, just a mother who didn't know whether to be proud or furious or both. "You didn't tell anyone you were back," she said. "Didn't plan to stay long," Jennifer replied. "Just wanted to finish my thesis." "On military justice," Patricia said. The irony isn't lost on me. Jennifer's lip twitched. Neither on me. The silence between them was thick but not cold. It was the silence of two women who understood what the other carried, the same burden, worn differently. One had spent her life enforcing the system. The other was trying to change it. Patricia's eyes softened. You know this will go public. I know. And that they'll question your motives, accuse you of using my name. Jennifer looked down at her bandaged hand. Then maybe they'll finally say my name at all. Her mother said nothing. She didn't need to. The truth hung there between them, unspoken but heavy. Jennifer had spent her career distancing herself from her mother's shadow, and now it was that very shadow that would make the system listen. Outside, a convoy of military police vehicles rumbled by. The investigation had begun. In a small interrogation room across the base, Derek Coleman leaned back in his chair, chains clinking softly around his wrists. He didn't look worried. He looked bored. He'd been through this before. The questions, the reports, the paperwork. It always ended the same. A few months of bad detail, maybe a transfer. Then he'd be back. Men like him always came back. The system was built to forgive men like him, the assets, the proven operators. He smirked when the door opened. The investigator who walked in wasn't an MP. She was an officer, older, composed, with the detached focus of someone who'd read every file twice before stepping in. Staff Sergeant Coleman, she said, taking a seat. You know why you're here. Yeah, he said, leaning forward. Some chick in a cafe decided to play victim. Her pen didn't move. That chick, she said evenly, is Captain Jennifer Morrison. The smirk faltered, just a flicker, but she caught it. He tried to recover, shrugging. So, doesn't change what happened. Oh, it changes everything, she said quietly. Because now we have command involvement and video evidence, and your service record, which looks less like a career and more like a warning label. Coleman's jaw tightened. He looked away toward the blank wall. You can't touch me. My co will. Your co, she interrupted, is currently being questioned by 3 generals. That shut him up. She leaned forward, her voice dropping. You've been protected for 8 years, Sergeant, but tonight, protection's over. And you know what's worse than facing justice? Facing it in front of the people who built your shield. He didn't answer, but for the first time his hand stopped tapping on the table. By dawn, the base was still locked down. Helicopters idled quietly on the tarmac. Files moved faster than they ever had. Every officer, every commander, every soldier connected to Coleman's chain of command was called in. What began as one incident now looked like an entire structure collapsing in slow motion. General Morrison moved like a storm through the hallways, calm on the outside, unrelenting underneath. She wasn't there to make examples, she was there to correct a failure. Her voice, low but precise, carried the weight of years spent watching good people destroyed by negligence disguised as procedure. At one point, she paused outside the window overlooking the training fields. Hundreds of soldiers moved in formation, unaware of how close their world had come to rotting from the inside. She thought of her daughter, of the blood on that cafe floor. She thought of how many others never got this kind of intervention. Justice, she realized, shouldn't depend on whose child you were. Jennifer couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the moment again, the sudden motion, the impact, the sound. But more than that, she saw the faces around her, the witnesses who hesitated, the fear, the doubt. She didn't blame them. She understood hesitation. But she also knew what silence did. When the nurse returned with coffee, Jennifer asked, "Do you have a laptop charger?" The nurse blinked. "Ma'am, you should rest." "Please," Jennifer said, "it's important." Within minutes, her laptop was open again. She pulled up her thesis, scrolling past the introduction to the unfinished section, case study, the disappearance of accountability. She added a line, then another. Her fingers moved faster than her thoughts. It always begins with hesitation. 1 second of disbelief that what's happening could actually be happening. And by the time someone decides to act, the damage is already done. She paused, staring at the blinking cursor. The cut on her forehead throbbed. Then she added, "But sometimes, the moment someone fights back isn't the start of the story. It's the breaking point of years of silence." She hit save. Outside, morning light began to creep through the blinds. Somewhere down the hall, footsteps echoed, sharp, steady, deliberate. Her mother. Jennifer closed the laptop and exhaled. She wasn't sure if what they were doing would change anything. But for the first time in years, she felt something that almost scared her. Hope. In the command center, General Morrison gathered her staff. "This doesn't stop with Coleman," she said. "We open every complaint he was connected to, every commander who ignored them, every officer who signed those dismissals." One major hesitated. "Ma'am, that could expose a lot." She met his eyes. "Then maybe it's time the light reached the corners." And just like that, the investigation expanded, no longer about a single assault but a pattern. When the sun rose fully, Fort Benning was still under lockdown. But something else had shifted, too: the culture, the tone, the unspoken rules that had kept men like Coleman untouchable. And in the small infirmary room, Jennifer watched that sunrise, its light crawling slowly across the wall. Her bruises ached, but her spirit did not. She whispered to herself, as if to the ghosts of every silenced woman she'd ever served beside, "Not this time." And outside, 3 generals moved in unison, dismantling a machine that had stayed broken for far too long. When the news broke, it didn't explode, it seeped. A single paragraph buried in a morning defense brief. Fort Benning under temporary lockdown following internal investigation. No names, no details, just enough to make the phone lines start buzzing. By midday, the whispers had turned into questions. Reporters started calling the Pentagon press office. Soldiers in other bases started hearing rumors about a staff sergeant, a civilian assault, and generals showing up unannounced. Inside Fort Benning, the truth was still classified. But everyone felt it: the shift, the tension, the strange energy of accountability beginning to crawl up the chain of command. The first to speak were the women. One by one, they came forward, quietly at first, then louder. A corporal, a medic, a logistics specialist, each with their own story, their own version of being dismissed, ignored, silenced. And in every account, one name kept surfacing: Derek Coleman. He wasn't just a bad seed, he was a symptom. General Morrison read each report in silence. She didn't slam the table. She didn't shout. She simply turned to her aide and said, "We follow the threads, all of them." That meant days without rest, dozens of briefings, files reviewed line by line. But beneath the precision, she carried something heavier: the image of her daughter's face that day, bloodied but defiant. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that cut above Jennifer's eyebrow, and the rage returned, cold, controlled, weaponized. She fought foreign enemies her whole life, but this was worse. This was rot from within. In the infirmary, Jennifer scrolled through the first news blurb on her phone. The lack of detail was intentional, she could tell. Someone was trying to keep things quiet, at least for now. She wasn't sure if that was good or bad. Her inbox was full: old comrades checking in, journalists fishing for a quote, even strangers sending messages of support. But she didn't answer any of them. She wasn't ready to be anyone's symbol. Not yet. A soft knock on the door made her look up. A young private stepped in, holding a sealed folder. "Ma'am, from General Morrison's office." Jennifer hesitated. "You can leave it there." "Yes, ma'am." The private set it down, then lingered awkwardly. "Ma'am just wanted to say, what you did, it mattered." Jennifer blinked. "You don't even know what I did." He smiled faintly. I know what it looked like." Then he left. She stared at the folder for a long time before opening it. Inside were photocopies, witness statements, complaint reports, memos. Some had Coleman's name, others had signatures from officers she recognized. And at the top of one page, in bold type, the phrase, "Complaint dismissed due to insufficient evidence." She'd read those words before in textbooks, case studies, even her own report once, years ago. But seeing them here again made something inside her twist. She turned the page, then another, until she found it, a name she hadn't expected. Captain Elena Price. Jennifer froze. She knew that name. They served together during the Eastern Europe deployment. Price had been part of the intel team, sharp, tough, impossible to intimidate. She filed a report back then. Jennifer remembered, but it had gone nowhere. Now, years later, here it was, dismissed, buried just like the rest. Jennifer pressed her thumb against the paper, tracing the signature line. She whispered to herself, how many of us did they break? Meanwhile, Coleman sat in an interrogation cell, the kind built not for violence, but for waiting, the kind that made a man face his own echo. The smirk was gone now. Sleep deprivation and silence had stripped away the arrogance, leaving only nerves. When the door opened this time, it wasn't the investigator from before. It was General Morrison herself. He stiffened. "Ma'am." "Don't speak." Her tone was ice. She sat across from him, gloved hands folded neatly on the table. "I read every report with your name on it," she said. "Do you want to know what I found?" He didn't answer. "Patterns," she continued. "Commanders who looked the other way. Witnesses who recanted under pressure. A system that learned how to protect you because you knew how to exploit it." She leaned forward slightly. "Tell me, Sergeant, how many times did you think about the women you hurt?" He swallowed hard. I didn't." "Don't lie to me." Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Each word landed with surgical precision. "You didn't hit my daughter because you lost your temper. You hit her because she said no. The same reason you've done it before. The same reason you thought you'd get away with it again." He tried to look away, but her stare held him in place. "You built your career on fear," she said. "But fear doesn't last forever. It breaks. And when it does, men like you have nowhere left to hide." She stood, straightened her jacket, and turned for the door. Before leaving, she added softly, "Your command will answer for you, but your legacy ends tonight." When the door closed, Coleman dropped his head into his hands. For the first time, the silence didn't comfort him. It crushed him. That evening, Jennifer was finally cleared to leave the infirmary. The nurse handed her a set of temporary base passes and a reminder to rest. She didn't intend to. As she stepped outside, the air felt different, fresher somehow, like the storm had passed even though it hadn't. Soldiers moved quietly, respectfully. Conversation stopped when she walked by. Some saluted, others just nodded. She wasn't used to that kind of attention. It didn't feel like respect, it felt like responsibility. When she reached the command building, she found her mother standing alone in the hallway, staring at a bulletin board lined with reports. Neither spoke at first. Then Patricia said, "You shouldn't be here." "Neither should you," Jennifer replied gently. "You haven't slept in 2 days." Patricia gave a faint smile. "Generals don't sleep when the system cracks." Jennifer stepped closer. "What happens next?" Her mother's gaze drifted toward the conference room beyond the glass. "We'll hand it over to the Inspector General's office. Formal charges, court-martials, a public statement. And you?" "I'll face questions about conflict of interest. They'll say I interfered." Jennifer hesitated. "Did you?" Patricia looked at her daughter, expression unreadable. "Would you rather I had?" Jennifer opened her mouth, then closed it again. She didn't have an answer. For all her belief in procedure, she knew one thing for certain. If her mother hadn't intervened, Coleman would still be free tonight. Her voice was softer when she spoke again. You always said rank was about responsibility. Patricia nodded slowly. It is, but somewhere along the way, too many started using it for protection instead. They stood there a moment, two soldiers, two generations, bound by blood and burden. Jennifer finally said, maybe we can make them remember what it was supposed to mean. Patricia's voice barely carried. That's the goal. Later that night, in her quarters, Jennifer opened her laptop again. The cursor blinked on the unfinished sentence of her thesis. She began to type. Change doesn't begin when people notice injustice. It begins when they refuse to accept silence as procedure. She paused, reading the line aloud in a whisper. It sounded almost like a promise. The notifications on her phone kept pinging news updates, messages, social media mentions. She ignored them all except one, a name that made her chest tighten. Elena Price. The message was short. He did the same to me. Thank you for not staying quiet. Jennifer stared at the screen for a long time, her throat tightening. Then she typed back. You don't have to thank me, just don't stop. By morning, the lockdown was partially lifted. But its echo remained. Coleman's arrest had sparked something none of them expected, a movement. Soldiers were requesting transfers to Morrison's division, citing leadership integrity. Female officers were demanding open reviews of complaint archives. Something was shifting. When Jennifer walked past the parade field that morning, she noticed it in their eyes, the subtle way soldiers looked at her now. Not as a victim, not as a general's daughter, but as proof that silence could be broken. And yet, even with that quiet respect, she felt uneasy, because she knew what was coming. The media, the politics, the retaliation. She'd seen this pattern before. Systems resist change like wounds resist healing by trying to close too soon. That night she stood outside under the floodlights, the wind brushing through the trees. Somewhere in the distance, a flag flapped in the darkness. Her mother joined her, silent for a moment before saying softly, "You know this won't end neatly." "I know," Jennifer said, "but maybe it'll end honestly." Patricia looked at her, pride and sorrow mixing in her eyes. "You've always been braver than I was." Jennifer smiled faintly. "No, Mom, you just had to fight from the top down. I'm fighting from the bottom up." They stood there in silence, the night stretching around them, two women, one battle, finally on the same side. And somewhere behind them, the base that once stayed silent began to wake up. How fast does truth travel? Faster than a convoy, faster than an order up the chain. Sometimes all it takes is one message, one leak, and the world starts listening. By sunrise, Fort Bennying's story was no longer a rumor. It was everywhere. Defense blogs, news tickers, talk shows. 3 generals locked down base over assault case. Daughter of U.S. general attacked, military accountability in question. The words spread like wildfire, stripping away privacy, distorting details, turning pain into headlines. Jennifer woke to the sound of her phone vibrating endlessly against the desk. She didn't have to check to know what it was: notifications, interviews, offers. The story had broken. She sat up slowly, the weight of exhaustion pressing behind her eyes. For a long time she just stared at the wall, pale, bare, and quiet. She used to crave silence. Now it felt like an accomplice. A soft knock. Her mother didn't wait for permission before entering. "You saw?" Patricia asked. Jennifer nodded. It was only a matter of time. "They're calling it a scandal," Patricia said bitterly, "as if justice is a PR issue." Jennifer gave a small, tired smile. "You know the rules: scandal sells, accountability doesn't." Patricia sighed and handed her a printed memo, the kind with words like pending statement and optics management. "The Pentagon wants me to hold a press conference," she said. "They'll expect you there." Jennifer hesitated. "Do I have a choice?" Her mother's silence was the answer. She leaned back against the pillow, eyes half closed. They'll tear it apart, you know. The narrative, they'll say I provoked him, or used you, or… I know, Patricia interrupted softly, and that's why we tell the truth first. Jennifer's laugh was quiet and sad. The truth's never first, Mom. It's always the cleanup act. Patricia didn't argue. She just sat down beside the bed, hands folded neatly in her lap. The two women looked like mirror images separated by years and scars. One had spent decades defending the system, the other was daring to confront it. You don't have to speak, Patricia said after a moment. I can handle the press. Jennifer shook her head. If I stay silent now, then everything that happened, it just becomes another story people forget next week. She exhaled slowly. No, they need to hear it from me. That afternoon, the conference room filled with journalists, flashing cameras, and the quiet hum of tension. Flags stood neatly behind the podium. A row of microphones waited like interrogators. When the generals entered, the crowd hushed. Patricia Morrison stood at the center, every inch of her posture command. To her right, Jennifer, still bruised, still calm, her uniform immaculate despite the faint cut above her brow. It wasn't the image anyone expected. The general's daughter standing beside her mother, not as a symbol of privilege, but of defiance. Patricia began the statement in a steady, clipped tone. Yesterday, a serious incident occurred at Fort Benning involving Staff Sergeant Derek Coleman. Immediate action was taken. Investigations are underway. No one, regardless of rank, is above accountability. She paused. But this is also a moment of reckoning for the institution we serve, because when silence protects wrongdoing, silence becomes the enemy. The room buzzed with murmurs, cameras flashed. Then Jennifer stepped forward. Her voice, though soft, carried clearly through the microphones. I wasn't at Fort Benning as an officer. I was there as a person, a woman who said no, and for that I was hit. A ripple moved through the crowd. She continued, measured, unwavering. I recorded it not because I wanted attention, but because I knew how stories like mine end, ignored, buried, forgotten. I've seen the reports. I've written them. I've watched how they vanish when they become inconvenient. Her gaze lifted toward the cameras, her tone quiet but firm. This time they won't. A long silence followed. Then the room erupted in questions, overlapping, insistent. Captain Morrison, are you accusing the military of systemic cover-ups? General Morrison, is your leadership under review? Will the Army issue a public apology? Neither woman answered right away. They didn't need to. The truth was already moving faster than they could control. By evening, news anchors spoke her name with clinical detachment. Captain Jennifer Morrison, daughter of General Patricia Morrison, the woman at the center of Fort Benning's lockdown. Her face was on every screen. The footage of her speech replayed again and again, clipped into sound bites, analyzed by people who had never worn the uniform, never understood the quiet courage it took to stand there and not flinch. She didn't watch. Instead, she sat alone in her quarters, the glow of her laptop lighting her tired features. The cursor blinked against an empty line in her thesis. Her fingers hovered over the keys. When truth becomes public, it stops belonging to the person who lived it. She paused, feeling that sentence like a bruise. Then added, and yet without that risk, without that exposure, the silence wins. She hit save. Across the base, soldiers were talking, not gossiping, talking. The kind of conversations that only happen after someone finally says what everyone's been afraid to. In the mess hall, a young private leaned toward his squadmate. You hear what she said, silence becomes the enemy, damn. His friend nodded slowly. Yeah, guess we needed to hear that. For once, they weren't talking about deployment rotations or promotions. They were talking about integrity, about the kind of courage that didn't fire bullets but spoke truth. Inside her office, General Morrison stared out at the night sky. The day had been long, too long, but there was something almost sacred about the stillness now. Her aide entered quietly. "Ma'am, Coleman's preliminary hearing is scheduled. Commands recommending full court-martial." "Good," Patricia said without turning around. "There's more." The aide hesitated. "Several other names are surfacing, commanders who dismissed complaints, patterns across multiple bases." Patricia's eyes closed briefly. "How many?" "Too many for coincidence, ma'am." She turned then, her face hardening. "Then we don't stop at Fort Benning." The aide nodded. "Ma'am, that'll cause waves." She looked back toward the window, "Then let them come." Her voice softened, almost a whisper meant only for herself. For once, the tide's on the right side. That night Jennifer took a walk along the outer perimeter. The air was cool, the hum of generators low. In the distance, the flag rippled under the floodlights, steady and indifferent. She thought about the women who'd written to her, names she didn't know, stories that felt all too familiar. One message stood out. "I never filed my report. I was scared. You made me wish I had." She stopped walking, letting those words sink in. Maybe that was what this was really about, not her, not the headlines, but that one message. That one person who might finally speak because she had. She pulled out her phone and began recording a voice memo. Not for publication, not for anyone but herself. Her voice was soft, almost reflective. "I used to think justice was a process, a form, a report, a chain of command. But now I think it's simpler. Justice is just the moment when someone finally listens." She ended the recording and stared out into the dark field. Behind her, a shadow moved, her mother, walking quietly across the gravel. "You're supposed to be resting," Patricia said gently. Jennifer smiled faintly. "You're supposed to be retired." "Not yet," her mother said, coming to stand beside her. They watched the flag for a moment. "Do you ever wonder," Jennifer asked softly, "if the system can actually change?" Patricia exhaled. "Not quickly, not cleanly, but piece by piece, maybe." Jennifer nodded. "Then maybe that's enough." Her mother looked at her. "You know what happens next, don't you?" Jennifer met her gaze. "They'll try to discredit me, find something, anything. That's how it works." "And when they do?" She thought for a long moment, then said quietly, "I'll let them talk, but I won't stop." Patricia's eyes softened, pride, pain, and resignation all at once. "You sound like a Morrison," she said. Jennifer smiled. "Guess I finally earned it." They stood there in silence again, two silhouettes under the floodlight. For the first time, neither was trying to lead the other. They were just there, mother and daughter, soldier and survivor, both carrying the same invisible weight. And somewhere in the still night, amid all the noise of politics and headlines and hearings to come, something pure lingered. The quiet, stubborn belief that truth, once spoken, doesn't die. It echoes. When the backlash came, it came dressed in respectability. No one shouted at her, no one called her a liar. They just started calling her controversial. That's how it begins, not with attack but erosion. A phrase here, a headline there. Captain Morrison divides military ranks. Whistleblower or opportunist. They never said she was wrong. They just made people wonder if she was right enough. The machine had started to turn again, quiet, sophisticated, relentless. And Jennifer knew it the moment the first anonymous source appeared on a defense blog, questioning her motives. She sat at her desk in the dim light, reading every word without reaction. Her hand didn't shake, her jaw didn't tighten. She expected this, she studied this. This was the system's immune response, the body trying to kill the infection called accountability. Still, the words hurt. Her mother's voice on the phone was calm, clipped, controlled. "They'll test you," Patricia said. They'll try to make you doubt yourself. Jennifer leaned back in the chair, staring at the ceiling. They already are. Then remember who you are. She smiled faintly. That's the part they're rewriting. Outside, the world kept spinning. Fort Benning reopened. Training resumed. Command meetings were quieter now, but the looks were different. Respect, fear, admiration, all mixed together. Jennifer walked through it like a ghost. She wasn't one of them anymore, not entirely. She was the one who'd brought the spotlight, and no soldier wants the light in a place built on discipline and control. Still, there were moments that pierced through the noise. A young sergeant who stopped her in the hallway to say thank you. A female recruit who whispered, "You made us believe someone, watching now." Those words didn't erase the hate, but they mattered more. Late one night, Jennifer sat in her quarters, reviewing a flash drive someone had slipped under her door earlier that day. No note, no name, just a drive. Inside were files, old complaint reports, buried memos, email exchanges between senior officers. And one folder stood out. Project Horizon. She frowned. She'd never heard of it. The documents were heavily redacted, but one thing was clear. Coleman's unit had been involved in off-record operations overseas. Black missions, untraceable deployments. And right there, her own name, listed as a field liaison 2 years prior. That made no sense. She'd never been assigned to any project by that name. She clicked deeper. Buried within the attachments was something worse, a memo signed by a senior colonel. Complaint filed by CPT. Morrison to be sealed under security classification per Horizon Directive. Her breath caught. That was Coleman's file. It was hers. The assault she had reported years ago, the one dismissed as unsubstantiated. It hadn't disappeared. It had been hidden. She felt the room spin slightly, the air tightening around her. She'd always suspected the report hadn't been properly closed, but seeing it, her name stamped beside a blacked-out paragraph, made it real. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. They buried me too. The next morning, she took the drive to her mother's office. General Morrison was reviewing paperwork, her eyes red from lack of sleep. Jennifer placed the flash drive on the desk without a word. Patricia looked up. "What's this?" "Evidence," Jennifer said quietly, "of a system that doesn't just protect predators, it hides the victims." Her mother frowned, inserting the drive. As she read, her expression shifted from confusion to disbelief to quiet, controlled rage. When she finished, she leaned back, eyes fixed on the screen. "They classified your report," she said slowly, "under a covert operations directive." "I didn't even know that was possible," Jennifer said. "It isn't," Patricia replied, "not legally." The room fell silent. Jennifer's voice trembled slightly. "I thought I was fighting the system, Mom, but I was part of its paperwork all along." Patricia stood abruptly, packing. "Who had access to this directive?" "High Command, Intel Division, maybe someone from Defense Oversight." Patricia's eyes narrowed. "Then that's where we go next." "We?" Jennifer asked. Her mother turned to her. "You think I'm letting them rewrite my daughter's history?" Jennifer hesitated. "You're already under review, Mom. If you push harder, they'll—" "They'll what?" Patricia cut in. "Take my stars, let them. I earned them doing what was right. I can lose them the same way." Jennifer stared at her mother, really stared, and for the first time she saw not a general, but the soldier her mother used to be. The one who believed service meant something sacred. The one Jennifer had wanted to become. The next few days blurred into movement, classified meetings, encrypted emails, tense phone calls that ended mid-sentence. The flash drive had opened a door neither of them could close. They discovered that Project Horizon had been used to quietly seal dozens of misconduct reports across multiple bases, all under the guise of national security. It wasn't about protecting missions. It was about protecting reputations. Coleman's file was only one of many. The deeper they went, the clearer it became. This wasn't one man's corruption. It was a system's design. And the more they uncovered, the more dangerous it became. Because systems like this don't collapse quietly. That evening, as the sky turned crimson over the parade field, Jennifer sat alone at the edge of the tarmac. She could see her reflection faintly in a hangar window, tired eyes, fatting bruise, hair pulled tight. She looked like a soldier again, but inside she didn't feel like one. Her mother found her there, as she always did. "You know what happens if we go public with this," Patricia said softly. Jennifer nodded. "We'll lose everything." Her mother sat beside her. Maybe not everything, maybe just what was never real to begin with. Jennifer looked down at her hands, scarred, strong, trembling slightly. "All I wanted was to make the system fair," she said. "Now I'm about to burn it." Patricia's voice was steady. "Sometimes fairness isn't built, it's reborn." They sat there in silence for a long time. The sun dipped low, painting their shadows long across the tarmac. Then Jennifer whispered, "If we do this, there's no going back." Patricia nodded. "Good, then forward's the only direction left." The following morning, an encrypted email arrived in Jennifer's inbox. No sender name, no signature. Just a line of text. "If you speak, they'll release your classified file. Choose carefully." Her heart pounded. For a moment, fear, the old kind, gripped her chest. Then something else replaced it, resolve. She opened a new document, her thesis. And at the top of the final chapter she wrote, "The truth has never needed permission to exist, only courage to survive." She saved it not to her computer but to the cloud, to drives, to backups across the network. She sent it to every journalist who'd ever asked for a statement, every watchdog organization, every soldier who'd reached out. And then she sat back and whispered, "Let it breathe." Hours later, chaos. Newsrooms exploded with the story. Project Horizon, classified cover-ups, sealed reports, dozens of victims. The Pentagon scrambled for statements. Patricia was called to Washington immediately. The base went silent again, but this time it wasn't fear. It was reckoning. When the convoy came to collect her mother, Jennifer stood outside the HQ, watching. Patricia looked at her daughter one last time, before getting into the vehicle. "Whatever happens next," she said softly, "don't let them teach you to be quiet." Jennifer managed a faint smile, wouldn't dream of it. As the convoy drove away, she felt something strange. Not victory, not relief, but peace. Because for the first time, the truth wasn't buried anymore. It was out. Alive. And even if the system fought back, it would never again be able to say, "We didn't know." That night Jennifer sat by her window, the hum of the base distant, the stars sharp and silent. Her phone buzzed, a message from Alina Price. "You did it." Jennifer smiled, typing back. "No, we started it." Then she set the phone aside, leaned her head against the glass, and whispered into the quiet. "Sometimes justice doesn't roar, it whispers, and it's enough." Outside, Fort Benning stood under the same flag, but the ground beneath it had changed. Because one woman had refused to stay invisible. And one truth, once sealed and forgotten, had finally been seen. How far does the truth travel before someone tries to kill it? By the time the Senate called for hearings, the headlines had already written their verdicts. Project Horizon scandal deepens. General Morrison to testify amid military misconduct inquiry. The networks ran her face next to Jennifer's, mother and daughter divided by titles, one symbol of command, the other of rebellion. Inside Washington's defense complex, the air was colder. People spoke in coded phrases. Every statement began with "off the record." Every loyalty was conditional. Patricia Morrison walked those hallways like a woman made of glass and steel, transparent in her intent, unbreakable in her focus. She'd been in war zones, briefed presidents, negotiated ceasefires. But nothing felt like this quiet war fought in marble corridors where every smile hit a blade. Her daughter was back at Fort Benning under protection orders. The threats had increased, anonymous calls, veiled warnings, even a car following her one night. She refused to be relocated. "If they're watching," she told her mother on the phone, "then let them see what honesty looks like." Patricia didn't argue. She understood. Some lessons were learned in blood. The first day of the hearings drew cameras from around the world. Rows of reporters, flashbulbs, the murmur of voices echoing off the wood-paneled chamber. Jennifer watched the live stream from her office, fingers clasped tightly together. When her mother entered the chamber, every camera turned. 3 stars on her shoulders, silver streaks in her hair, the image of authority under fire. She took her oath, adjusted the microphone, and began. Her voice was steady. "Ladies and gentlemen, I have served this country for 32 years. I have commanded in combat. I have written policies on conduct and accountability. And yet, I stand before you today to say we failed. I failed. Because a culture that protects silence over truth is a culture that betrays the uniform itself." The room went still. She continued, eyes unwavering. Project Horizon was not a rogue operation. It was a convenience, a means to hide embarrassment. It buried misconduct under the flag of secrecy. It protected careers, not missions. And the people who paid the price were our own. A senator leaned forward. "General Morrison, are you implying the department knowingly used classified designations to conceal criminal behavior?" Patricia's answer was simple: yes. The silence that followed was louder than any explosion. She reached for the folder before her, the flash drive Jennifer had found, now printed and sealed as evidence. These files include 23 suppressed complaints from multiple bases. Some victims left the service. Some took their lives. My daughter could have been one of them. Her voice wavered for the first time, only slightly. She chose to stand instead. Across the country, in that small office at Fort Benning, Jennifer closed her eyes as those words echoed through the live stream. Her mother wasn't defending her. She was standing beside her. The days that followed blurred into headlines and hearings. Politicians traded outrage for airtime. Generals issued carefully worded statements about ongoing reforms. But beneath the noise, something real began to move, a quiet shift among soldiers, officers, analysts. People were asking questions again. The kind of questions that make power nervous. And that nervousness showed. Jennifer's inbox filled with warnings, "For your own safety." Her credit was frozen, her social media hacked twice. One evening, she found her car tires slashed outside the base housing. No one claimed it, no one needed to. The message was clear. She didn't tell her mother. Patricia already had enough to fight. But that night, Jennifer sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the scars on her hands. She whispered, "They can take everything but not the truth." And somehow, saying it aloud made it true again. Meanwhile, in Washington, Patricia was called into a private briefing with the Defense Oversight Committee. Behind closed doors, no cameras. The men in the room spoke in careful tones, circling her like lawyers at a wake. "General Morrison," one said, "your testimony has created instability. You've undermined confidence in the institution." She leaned forward slightly. "No, I exposed why that confidence was already broken." Another man, older, sighed. "You've made enemies, Patricia, powerful ones. If you resign quietly, the reforms can continue without scandal." She met his eyes. "You want my silence wrapped in gratitude." He didn't deny it. Sometimes progress requires compromise. Her reply was ice cold. Sometimes compromise is the infection. The meeting ended in quiet fury. By morning, an internal memo circulated. General Patricia Morrison to be relieved of command pending review. She didn't react. She'd expected it. You don't challenge a system this old without losing something sacred. When she called Jennifer that night, her voice was calm. "They took my command," she said. Jennifer went quiet. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," Patricia said. Then softer, "I just forgot what freedom feels like." There was a long silence on the line. Then Jennifer said, "They think they won." Patricia smiled faintly. "They think too small." Weeks passed. Investigations multiplied. Whistleblowers stepped forward. The hearings didn't end with applause. They ended with exhaustion. But change, slow and painful, had begun. New oversight committees formed. New reporting systems established. Fort Benning, once a fortress of silence, became a testing ground for reform. And through it all, Jennifer remained at the center, not because she wanted to be, but because she refused to leave. Her mother moved out of the Pentagon circle, teaching ethics and leadership at a quiet military academy. Some called it exile, she called it peace. And sometimes, when Jennifer visited, they'd sit together on the porch at sunset. No uniforms, no ranks, just two women who had weathered the same storm. One evening, Patricia asked softly, "Was it worth it?" Jennifer looked out at the horizon, the sky streaked in orange and gold. "I used to think justice meant winning," she said. "Now I think it just means not quitting." Her mother smiled. "That's close enough." But even as the world moved on, there was one file Jennifer couldn't ignore, the one line redacted in her own sealed report. It had never been decrypted, not even with her mother's clearance. One night she opened it again. The black bar across the page hid a single name. Who had ordered her report buried? Who had decided her pain was classified? She ran a new trace through an encrypted channel. The answer came back minutes later, a string of metadata, a signature code. Her breath caught. It was Coleman. It wasn't her commanding officer. It was someone higher. Someone from Defense Intelligence. Someone still in power. She stared at the name. And in that moment, she realized the fight wasn't over. The machine hadn't died. It had simply changed shape. The next morning, she packed a small duffel, left a note on her desk, and drove toward D.C. The camera of memory might have followed her car, cutting through dawn light, her reflection steady in the windshield, her eyes unafraid. The voiceover, quiet and deliberate, might have said, "Some wars end with signatures. Others begin when you finally read what they tried to erase." She didn't know what she'd do when she got there. All she knew was that silence was no longer an option. And somewhere across every base where women once hesitated to speak, someone saw her story and whispered her name, not as a scandal, not as a soldier, but as proof. Proof that even in a world built on obedience, one act of defiance can change the order of things. That night, Patricia received a text from an unknown number. A photo. Her daughter, walking toward the Capitol steps, head high. No caption. No warning. Just light breaking through shadow. Patricia smiled through tears. Because she knew. Her daughter wasn't walking into danger. She was walking into history. What do you do when the enemy wears your uniform? That thought kept circling in Jennifer's mind as she crossed the D.C. bridge at dawn. The Potomac shimmered beneath her, gray and endless. Ahead, the Capitol rose like a monument to both ideals and hypocrisy. She had come to finish what they'd started, not out of revenge, but out of necessity. The truth wasn't safe in files or hearings. It had to be spoken. Her phone buzzed again. Another anonymous number. Just 3 words. "They know you're coming." She deleted it. Let them know. The Pentagon felt colder than she remembered. Polished floors, perfect symmetry, the faint smell of disinfectant and bureaucracy. A place where silence was policy and loyalty was currency. She flashed her ID at the checkpoint. The guard hesitated, eyes flicking toward the screen, then handed it back silently. Her name was still in the system for now. Inside, the corridors hummed with controlled chaos. Phones ringing, papers shifting, officers moving with purpose but avoiding eye contact. Everyone knew the Morrison name. And everyone knew what it stood for now: trouble wrapped in truth. She reached the intelligence wing, the one with frosted doors and no signage. The same department that had classified her report under Project Horizon. When she entered, the secretary's smile froze mid-greeting. "I need to see Deputy Director Callahan," Jennifer said quietly. The woman stammered, "Do you have an appointment?" "No," Jennifer replied, voice calm, eyes steady. "But he has my past under lock and key. I think that earns me 5 minutes." The secretary hesitated, picked up the phone, murmured something. Moments later, the door clicked open. "Send her in." Callahan's office was all sharp lines and clean air. A man in his 60s, silver hair, still in uniform. He looked like he'd been carved from the same marble as the building, dignified, immovable. "Captain Morrison," he said, rising slightly from behind his desk. "This is unexpected." She didn't sit. "Then it's honest," she said. He gestured to the chair anyway. "Please." Reluctantly, she sat. The leather creaked. The distance between them was exactly measured, authority versus truth. "I know why you're here," he said. "You found your old file." Jennifer's expression didn't change. "You buried it." "I classified it," he corrected, "for your protection." The words hit like ice water. "My protection," she repeated. "You hid evidence of assault and misconduct under a national security code." He leaned back, fingers steepled. "You were involved in a covert operation at the time. The report included details of that mission. Exposure would have compromised assets overseas. It wasn't personal." "It was mine," she said sharply. He sighed like a teacher indulging a naive student. "Captain, I understand your frustration, but this wasn't about you. It was about the integrity of operations. The military doesn't survive without secrets." Her voice went quiet, dangerously quiet. "Secrets don't protect integrity, they protect power." Callahan's eyes hardened. "Watch yourself." "No," Jennifer said, "I'm done watching." She reached into her bag and slid a folder across his desk. "You didn't just classify one file. You sealed 23, including those of soldiers who took their own lives waiting for justice. Don't tell me this was about national security." He glanced at the folder but didn't touch it. "Do you really think you can dismantle the structure that keeps this country safe?" "I'm not trying to dismantle it," she said. "I'm trying to remind it what safety means." He smirked faintly, that familiar bureaucratic arrogance. "Idealism. Your mother had it too, cost her her stars." Jennifer's jaw tightened, "and earned her humanity." That made him pause. For a heartbeat, silence filled the room, not calm silence, but the kind that trembles under pressure. Finally, he said, "You've made enemies in high places, Captain. This," he gestured vaguely at her presence, "this will end your career." She stood. "Maybe, but it'll end yours first." He laughed softly, the kind of laugh meant to dismiss. "You think the public cares about another scandal. By next week, it'll be forgotten." Jennifer stepped closer, until only the desk separated them. "Maybe," she said, "but every soldier who's ever been silenced will remember, and that's who you should be afraid of." For the first time, he looked uncertain. She turned to leave, but he spoke again, lower, sharper. "You're not walking out of this building with those files." She looked back at him, eyes steady. "I already did." Outside, the air felt thinner, cleaner. She walked straight to the parking lot, heartbeat steady, fingers gripping the strap of her bag. The sun was high, glaring against the steel and glass. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was her mother. "Where are you?" "Leaving the Pentagon," Jennifer said. A long pause. "You found him, didn't you?" "Yes." "Did he threaten you?" Jennifer hesitated. "He warned me." Patricia's voice was low. "Then you're close." Jennifer smiled faintly. "That's what I thought." That evening, she sat in a small hotel room near Arlington, staring at her laptop. The folder labeled Horizon Truth blinked on the screen. Inside were every document, every buried file, every name. She could release it tonight. Send it to the press, to oversight committees, to the world. But the cost would be heavy. Not just for her. For soldiers still deployed under some of those same names. Truth wasn't clean. It never was. She closed her eyes, hearing her mother's voice in her head. "Justice isn't about noise, Jenny. It's about precision." She hesitated, then began deleting names. Not of perpetrators, but of innocent personnel attached to classified missions. She wouldn't destroy lives that hadn't broken the rules. When she was done, she uploaded the rest: secure server, mirrored databases, verified journalists. And then she hit send. It was done. She leaned back, breath trembling, tears she hadn't realized were forming slipping down her cheek. Not sadness. Not relief. Something deeper: release. Hours later, the world reacted. Screens lit up, feeds exploded. Whistleblower captain exposes decade of buried military assault reports. It wasn't her name in the headlines this time, just a captain. And that was exactly how she wanted it. Her phone rang. "Patricia." "You did it," her mother said softly. Jennifer exhaled, voice quiet but certain. "We did." Patricia's voice trembled, pride masked in discipline. "They'll come after you, you know." "I know. Do you regret it?" Jennifer looked out the window at the city lights, beautiful, cold, indifferent. "No," she said, "because for once they'll have to live in the daylight." That night, someone knocked on her hotel door. She tensed, checking the peephole. Two men in suits, no insignia. "Federal." One held up a badge. "Captain Morrison, we need to ask you to come with us." She opened the door slowly. "Am I under arrest?" "Not officially," the man said, "but you've triggered multiple security protocols." Jennifer stared at them for a long moment, then smiled faintly. "Then I guess the system's finally paying attention." Hours later, Patricia received a call. "Your daughter is being detained," a voice said, "for unauthorized dissemination of classified materials." Patricia's hands trembled around the phone. "Where?" "Federal Holding, Arlington." She didn't hesitate. "Tell them to prepare a second chair. I'm coming." When Jennifer saw her mother enter the interrogation room hours later, she almost laughed, from exhaustion, from disbelief, from love. "I told you not to get involved," she whispered. Patricia smiled. "I'm still your commanding officer in spirit." They sat side by side, handcuffed, facing two agents who looked deeply uncomfortable. One cleared his throat. "General Morrison, Captain Morrison, you've created a national security crisis." Patricia leaned forward. "No, we exposed a moral one." Jennifer's voice was steady, "and that's harder to contain." The agents exchanged a glance. "You both understand the consequences." Jennifer met her mother's eyes. "Yes," she said softly. "Do you?" The agent hesitated, then closed the file. "You'll be released pending review." They stood. Outside, the dawn light broke through the window, spilling across their faces. Jennifer felt it warm against her skin, real light, honest light. She turned to her mother. "Do you think it's over?" Patricia shook her head. "No, but maybe it's finally beginning." And together they walked into the morning, two soldiers stripped of rank, but not of purpose. Behind them, the system stirred uneasily, learning a truth it could never unlearn. That even one voice, once silenced, can echo loud enough to shake the walls built to contain it. What happens after the truth comes out? No one tells you that part. They write the headlines, they film the statements, but they never talk about the silence that follows, the long, uncertain quiet when justice has been spoken, but the world hasn't decided what to do with it yet. For Jennifer Morrison, that silence came 3 weeks after her release. The world had moved on, or at least pretended to. New scandals replaced old ones. Politicians offered apologies scripted by lawyers. And yet beneath it all, something had shifted. Across bases, soldiers were talking again. Complaints were being reviewed. Anonymous hotlines lit up with reports that had waited years to be believed. It wasn't victory, but it was motion. And for the first time, motion felt like enough. Jennifer sat on a bench overlooking the Potomac, her uniform jacket folded beside her. No rank, no insignia, just the quiet presence of a woman who had spent her life fighting battles no one saw. The wind was sharp, carrying the smell of rain and diesel. She could see the Pentagon in the distance, that perfect five-sided monument to control and order. And she could almost hear Callahan's voice still echoing inside it, trying to contain a truth that had already escaped. Her phone buzzed, a message from Alina Price. They reopened my case. For the first time, someone called to apologize. Jennifer smiled faintly. That was it. That was the reason for all of it. Not revenge, not exposure, just that one woman being heard. She typed back, "Good, don't stop." Then she slipped the phone into her pocket and closed her eyes. Her mother found her there an hour later, coat wrapped tight against the wind. Patricia looked older than she had a month ago, but also lighter, as if a lifetime of command had finally released her. "Didn't think you'd be this easy to find," she said softly. Jennifer smiled without opening her eyes. "You always find me." Patricia sat beside her. For a long moment, neither spoke. They just watched the slow movement of the river, steady, constant, indifferent. Then Patricia said, "I spoke with Defense Oversight this morning. They're offering me early retirement. No charges, no inquiry as long as I stop giving interviews." Jennifer looked over, "And will you?" Her mother smiled faintly. "You taught me better than that." Jennifer laughed quietly. "I didn't teach you anything you didn't already know." Patricia's gaze softened. "I just forgot what it meant to live by it." They sat in silence again, 2 generations of soldiers who had fought the same enemy in different forms. For one, it had been bullets and orders. For the other, truth and silence. And both had drawn blood. Back on the base, a framed photo now hung in the administrative hallway, a picture of Jennifer speaking at the hearing, head high, words mid-sentence. Beneath it, a plaque read, "Courage is not obedience, it's persistence." No one claimed to know who put it there. No one removed it. New recruits would stop to read it on their first day, some confused, some inspired, all reminded. Something had changed in the culture. Not everything, not enough, but something real. The kind of change that doesn't fade when headlines do. Weeks later, Jennifer stood before a small classroom at a military academy in Virginia. Her mother had been invited to lecture on ethics, but she'd insisted Jennifer speak instead. The cadets sat quietly as Jennifer told them a story, not about battles or rank or scandal, but about a coffee shop outside Fort Benning. About hesitation. About what happens when good people decide that someone else will handle it. She didn't name Coleman. She didn't name herself. She just spoke in that calm, deliberate rhythm that made people lean forward without realizing it. "When silence becomes habit," she said, "so does injustice." A young cadet raised his hand. "Ma'am, how do you fix something that big?" Jennifer smiled softly. "You don't fix it all at once. You fix it one choice at a time, one person deciding they're done being quiet." The room stayed still. Not dramatic silence, respectful silence. The kind that means someone's listening. After the lecture, as she walked the quiet corridors, Patricia joined her. "You sounded like me," she teased gently. Jennifer smirked. "I was quoting you word for word." Patricia raised an eyebrow. "Then I must have done something right." They stepped outside into the evening air. The flag above the academy fluttered, catching the last light of sunset. For the first time in months, there was peace between them, not the kind won through rank or orders, but through understanding. Patricia said softly, "You know, I used to think leadership meant protecting the system. And now," her mother's voice was almost a whisper, "now I think it means protecting the people the system forgets." Jennifer looked at her, really looked, and realized that this was her inheritance. Not medals, not legacy, but clarity. That night she returned to her apartment, a small, simple space filled with books, notes, and quiet. She sat at her desk and opened her thesis one last time. The document was finished, every chapter tied to something she'd lived. She scrolled to the final page, where a blank space waited. And she wrote, "Justice is not a destination. It's the act of refusing to stop walking." And sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. She stared at the words for a long time. Then she hit save. The next morning, Jennifer visited the memorial garden on base. Rows of names engraved in stone, some heroes, some forgotten. She left her insignia there, placing it at the foot of the monument. Not as resignation, as renewal. A group of new recruits passed by, whispering. One of them paused, recognizing her. "Ma'am, were you the—" Jennifer smiled gently. "Doesn't matter who I was, just remember why I did it." He nodded, eyes wide, unsure what to say. She turned away before he could speak, the wind catching her hair as she walked down the gravel path. Somewhere behind her, a bird called out, sharp, bright, alive. And for the first time in what felt like years, Jennifer let herself breathe. Weeks later, a letter arrived at her apartment, no return address. Inside was a single photo, 3 women in uniform standing together outside a courthouse, smiling. On the back, a handwritten note. "You started something, we'll finish it." She folded the photo carefully, set it on her desk, and whispered to the empty room. "That's all I ever wanted." The story might have ended there, quietly, honestly. But stories like hers don't end. They ripple. They echo in training grounds, in policy meetings, in every corner where silence once held power. Somewhere, a young woman on her first deployment would remember Jennifer Morrison's words and decide that no was enough. Somewhere, a commander would think twice before signing away a report. And somewhere, in a coffee shop near a military base, a man would hesitate just long enough for someone to stand up and stop him. Because courage, once shown, becomes contagious. And dignity, once acted upon, becomes unstoppable. On her last day in uniform, Jennifer met her mother by the river again. The air was clear, the sky wide. Neither of them spoke for a while. Then Patricia said, "You changed more than they'll ever admit." Jennifer smiled. "Good, that means it worked." Her mother looked at her, eyes glistening. "What will you do now?" Jennifer glanced at the horizon. "Maybe I'll write, maybe I'll teach, maybe I'll just rest for a while." Patricia nodded. "Whatever you do, don't stop being you." Jennifer looked at her mother, the woman who had taught her that silence can protect or destroy, and that the difference lies in what you do with it. She said softly, "You too, Mom." Then they stood, side by side, as the wind caught their hair and the river shimmered beneath them. 2 women bound by truth, carrying no rank but all the honor in the world. And when they finally walked away, the camera of the world might have followed, two silhouettes fading into sunlight. A quiet voice could have spoken over the closing scene, slow and certain. Sometimes history isn't written by victory. It's written by those who refuse to look away. And sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.